What makes a great project manager is somebody that has the experience, the knowledge, and the discipline to have a never give up attitude, and they can push past blocks and reach the benchmarks that really you're striving for. But to actually understand those benchmarks in the first place.
The lack of understanding the full process potentially can create delays where there's a need to wait for someone else to step in. The worst thing that can happen is when someone doesn't know the full process and they actually rely on other people's understanding to operate their set of values and benchmarks. That really holds your project to ransom. So when you are a resource of knowledge and you've got the expertise of time, you really can become someone who can help push the boundaries safely.
It takes experience to know the benchmarks, and it takes also discipline, which is actually knowing to see when something is going sideways and knowing how to jump in to put it back on track as quick as possible before it goes too far in the process. Because going too far in the process on a larger scale means that you could actually be faced with very costly decisions to go back, or you could be losing time to backtrack.
What you need to be really careful of is other people often have lower standards, and so they're quite willing to stop where you wouldn't stop. You would keep going until a different result comes.
You've really got to be like a bulldog and fight to the end to really push through to get to the highest levels, making sure the finishing, the construction, materials, hitting those benchmarks. If you don't do that, you just won't achieve the end result or become a legacy, because it's not going to be good enough. It's about doing what's promised, because there are many people out in the market that really are just out for a quick buck, but it's actually to show authentic and genuine concern that you really want to get this right, and you'll do anything to get it right for the customer.
You'd need to have experience in procurement internationally to find the best results you can get in manufacturing, design experience, and even artistic experience, sculpting clay. Because as a specific project manager in that role, you'd need to be able to jump into the process at any stage if it's necessary. Sometimes it's necessary to use contractors that you haven't used before, because it might be in a role that you're not using on an ongoing basis, like a crane operator or someone that delivers sculpture. But sometimes you see that they do not necessarily specialise in the specific field of sculpture. So as a project manager, it means that you need to direct them and
not being scared to jump in to change the course of things, and be forceful to ensure the benchmarks are being reached, and not to worry about being liked, as long as we can get the job done to our standards.
So it's really beneficial to have a project manager who's very specific to sculpture rather than a generalised project manager, and that's because often they'll need to jump into the process. They may need to sculpt clay even, or be able to recognise when the design's going off track, so they've got sort of a way of being able to analyse the design to keep it on track. Or maybe it's that they've got the experience to know and understand the benchmarks that are specific to art and the finishes and the construction and materials that are being used. It's also having a full list of pre-qualified suppliers that give the client the biggest advantage. A good project manager will have a pre-qualified list of those parties, and they might not all be local either, because to get the best result you need to go where you need to go to get the best result. If you've got a foundry which is in a place like China where it's pre-qualified and doing works for a lot of international artists, obviously there's cost advantages to do that, but also there's a lot of quality advantages to be had. They actually have built up processes which are far beyond a lot of Western countries. So having the backup and resources really means that you can guarantee and promise delivering, because creating public sculpture is a team effort. It's not just one artist making it. It's not a possibility. That takes time and experience, time to get those really quality people and experience to actually know how to identify them.
In a fairly defined niche, I have been a jack of all trades, and having the ability to be able to do any of those roles gives me a huge advantage. Understanding such a broad spectrum of information about the whole process is that there'll never be any time where things get held up because you're trying to work out what needs to be done. You just know what to do. Whether that's, you've got to sketch something to communicate, or you've got to actually sculpt, some of the clay models that are going to help implement certain ideas from the artists, or whether it means directing or even getting involved in the packaging of a sculpture. Because no one's going to have the responsibility like you are as the project manager of that job. You're dealing with a lot of different people and they've all got different mindsets, and you've got to be the one that can sort of harmonise communication between all of them. Every person in the process needs to understand how I can communicate in the way that everybody has the same ground to comment and then give valid feedback.
Especially if you're using an overseas foundry where there might be different culture and language. And sometimes I actually need to step into the zone and sketch. I might sketch for an hour to really make sure a design detail is understood fully, because I won't move on to the next stage until that detail is understood. Otherwise, you'd have to backtrack later on, and that's going to cost time, money and expense. When you've got time frames to meet, and really, the sculpture could be a smaller part of a bigger picture. You might have a $50 million building, and it might be a sculpture that might be $200,000, $400,000 worth of sculpture. And that's really the pinnacle of the project as far as statement and what people see. Imagine if that was going to be late to the project, then you open the project and all these defects on the sculpture. It wouldn't be good for the architect's name or the property developer. When you're going through a process where you've got time frames and you've got quality commitments, and sometimes maybe an artist has thought about the general look of a piece, but there's a lot of things to join the dots and make it seamless. So it means that you have to understand, to the point of knowing how to jump into the process at any stage, you need to understand the artist's intent, and you need to understand a lot about construction methods, materials, engineering, how things are delivered without damage, installation, getting all that organised in a timely manner. So there's a lot of knowledge that comes from the past that really makes that process seamless and effortless.
In any of the materials that I use, they're always of the highest grade, or any of the finishes that I'm wanting to achieve, they're always to the nth perfection. Often projects don't commission a sculpture, and one of the biggest mistakes is the concept installation process of creating a sculpture is very misunderstood. Most often it's thought of as being complex and convoluted, whereas with the right process it'd be quite streamlined and mitigated the risks.
My top goals as a project manager are to provide absolute stainless integrity to my clients, to take them along a journey filled with positive anticipation, and to really have them connect at a soul level with what's delivered in the end, because that's the only thing that's really going to make them own a sculpt as a legacy.
Definitely, when people get that final result, you do feel people's gratitude. They're feeling their connection with what's happened, and then they understand that you were helping them and responsible for it, and you delivered on what you promised. When the process is really done right and it's harmonised, so the sculpture, the end result, really does connect people and places.
In the complex, risky world of monumental sculpture, could you use a guiding hand and brain and 25 years of experience? Click the appointment link below. At the same time, scroll down for an explanation of our comprehensive diagnostic approach to get your project moving quickly and painlessly.